So Netflix reported really poor earnings this week. Year-over-year subscriber growth is slightly negative. But the biggest surprise was actually guidance for the current quarter, where management is saying that the number of subscribers will decrease by a couple million year over year. And so what happened was, and we have to, I think the stock is oversold. And I love buying broken stocks, but not broken companies. I'll explain that in a minute. But let's take a step back and talk about what happened with Netflix. So Netflix saw this massive boost in the number of subscribers they have over the past 2 years because of COVID. Of course, everyone stays home. You know, they watch more Netflix. They took more of my courses. And by the way, I'm seeing a slowdown this year in my course sales as well. But my MBA course sales are going through the roof, which is good. Yeah. So Netflix saw a big slowdown. So when I used to work in the hedge fund industry at Citadel and Pequot, I worked for a man named Carson Levitt. And Carson was George Soros' right-hand man. And whenever a stock would drop a lot or go up a lot, I'd go into his office and he would pull up the chart. And he's very unemotional about investing. He's amazing. And he would basically look at where the stock is right now, right? So for Netflix, I know he would say this if I went to his office right now. He would say, Chris, here's where Netflix is right now. It's at the same level right now as it was back in 2017. Are things better or worse for Netflix today versus back in 2017? And I would say, well, look, there's more competition from other streaming services, but I'd say it's a hell of a lot better. And it's almost like COVID never happened, right? So it's ridiculous how oversold this stock is. And I love the fact that the CEO founder is still running the company. And I never invest in companies, almost never, where the founder leaves. And I think Reed Hastings is brilliant. He's brilliant. And there are a lot of things that they can do actually to improve to improve sales. So about 50% of all 200 million plus subscribers, about 50% of them, what they do is they share their streaming password with their friends, family, etc. Imagine if Reed Hastings changed that policy. And in hindsight, I'm sure he's glad he allowed people to share, because that led to a massive increase in market share for Netflix in this market they created. And Bill Gates, I remember back in the 80s and 90s, Bill Gates was furious with the amount of pirated versions of Windows in China. In the 1990s, 98% of all versions of Windows in China were pirated. And then all of a sudden he took a step back. Instead of fighting piracy, he said, this is a beautiful thing, because this is establishing us in a marketplace, and we'll get a lot of market share and we'll charge for it later, and we'll change that piracy policy later. And that's exactly what they did. So by the same token, what Reed Hastings at Netflix can do is he's got the market share already, and he can start charging people or changing the subscription program to the extent that you cannot log in on multiple devices at the same time. He can also add advertising as well, which is what Amazon has done. I hope he doesn't do that. But since 2017, there's a lot of great new content on Netflix. Right? It's a different company now. It's a better company. Yes, there's more competition, but they have a hell of a lot more content. Great content. So here's a lot of the great shows they have right here. And I want to end this quick discussion on Netflix by talking about my favorite show, which is The Ozarks. And I want to talk particularly about Jason Bateman, who plays the role of Marty Burt. So Jason Bateman's character in the movie, or in the television show The Ozarks, he's incredibly unemotional. Unlike Ruth, who's in the middle there, who's very emotional in the show. She's a great actress as well. I just finished watching Inventing Anna, which was great. Also on Netflix. And so Jason Bateman in the show is unemotional. And I think if you want to be incredibly successful in business, you have to be unemotional like Jason Bateman is playing Marty Burt. Because you will not overreact at the worst times. And Warren Buffett once said, the New York Stock Exchange is the only store in the world where consumers sell stuff when it goes on sale. Think about that. Think about how emotional people are today selling Netflix. It's ridiculous. Now, if you're unemotional in business, you'll do extraordinarily well. Case in point, a lot of billionaires at hedge funds that I worked for, they're very unemotional. They don't get too happy when things go well and vice versa. And they don't freak out when stocks are falling, because things are never as bad as you think they are. And so Elon Musk, for example, is very unemotional. Case in point, March of 2020, when the market was at a bottom, he bought a ton of Tesla stock. It's publicly disclosed. You can look it up. Then he sold a ton of Tesla stock last fall when the market peaked. You have to be very unemotional in business in order to do incredibly well. You have to be a contrarian, and as Warren Buffett said, you have to be greedy when others are fearful and fearful when others are greedy, and be unemotional, just like Marty Byrde. Yeah. Now, quick little side note about Jason Bateman. This is really inspirational. So he was in a lot of TV shows back in the 80s when I was a kid, and he was in a lot of movies as well, like Teen Wolf Part 2. I remember that. And then in the 1990s, he wasn't in anything. And the reason is, and this is publicly disclosed, he talks about it, he's open about it. The reason is he was so burned out and he was in drug and alcohol rehab in the 1990s. And the beautiful thing about him is he turned his life around. You always get a second chance. And he went to rehab in the 90s, and eventually in the 2000s, he reinvented himself like nobody has done. You know, he did Arrested Development, The Ozarks, and tons of great movies like Game Night, for example, which is a funny movie you got to watch.